Welcome back to Food Done Right, an original podcast series brought to you by GIY. I'm Mick Kelly, I'm the founder of GIY, and on this episode we're bringing you one of the panel discussions that we hosted at the Harvest Festival in Waterford City. This panel was all about practical ways to get children to start growing their own food. And I was joined on the panel by Lilly Higgins, food writer and photographer and Irish Times columnist on midweek dinners, and Deirdre Doyle from the award-winning Cool Food School, teaching children from the age of 2. Deirdre has brought her expertise into schools, events and festivals across the country. We talked about how we get children interested in food and furthermore how we inspire them to want to grow their own food both at home and in school. So you're very welcome, both of you, and thank you for coming to talk to us about, I suppose, something that's, I think, really close to our hearts in GIY. We've spent a lot of time, we've spent a lot of time trying to, work with kids in schools and think about ways to get children interested in food and in growing. And maybe if we could start with that sort of general question first before we get into kind of the specifics of it. But like, Lily, what do you think is the current state of play with in terms of kids and food and growing food? Like, are they tuned into it or not? Are they kind of, I suppose the classic kind of idea at the moment would be, kids don't know where their food come from and so on. I suspect it's not as black and white as that, but what's your view of it?
There's one group of people that are incredibly connected, who are, they're out picking the blackberries and they know exactly what's going on. And then there's sort of another section who are completely unaware of where their food comes from, And it's like a huge mix of people as well. It's actually incredible. But I know even in my kids' class in school, they have a lunch delivery service, which is brilliant. But it sort of removes, again, that the food doesn't come from home and even seeing the source of it. So, my kids love all different foods, obviously. But I know we started off with an allotment, sort of just to educate ourselves years ago. When we first had kids, and I was just amazed at the stuff that they'd eat once they saw it growing. Like the way strawberries are the nicest when they're warmed from the sun and picked straight away. Like that strawberry is going to be nicer than anything you'll ever buy. But so it's kind of trying to give children that experience, I suppose. And I know we'd all be a bit nostalgic as well about our childhood, picking blackberries, and it's so amazing. Like I used to hate doing that when I was small, so it was so thorny. And then my mother would say, "But we can make blackberry jam," and I was like, "I hate blackberry jam," So, but it's trying to sort of educate them without overpowering them and trying to make it a bit exciting and trying to involve them. So I suppose first of all it all starts with where the food actually comes from, and it's teaching them a respect for farmers as well. So I think things like farmers markets are a brilliant way to get them out, and some farms do like open days and that, and even just the little kids up there having their hands in the soil and the wheelbarrows and planting seeds. I think it all really, really helps. So the sort of quick grow things like cress and radishes are all invaluable because they want results. Like I am very impatient growing stuff, so I know the kids are as well. Like they want those little microgreens, they want to be able to eat something that they've sowed, a few weeks
quickly
later. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you do obviously a lot of cooking and a lot of growing as well at home. Like what kind of impact have you seen that's had for your own kids? Is it sort of about just normalizing it for them, that it's just part of their world and they don't sort of feel any differently about it, or what? How has it sort of worked in the house then?
Well, for me, I think, and actually the big thing of herbs in front of me, like a really a really good access for them has been herbs. Because herbs are, very low maintenance. You don't have to keep on track of it too much. And I love to teach them about them and teach them when food has herbs in it. Like a lot of times my kids will say there's something missing from this, with stuffing, if there isn't enough, thyme or rosemary or something like that. They're very picky. And it's just getting them to know, like, there's lemon, thyme, and, there's apple mint, and there's a huge, huge world. They actually have nearly everything there at that stall. But teaching them so that they can pick mint leaves and make their own mint tea, things like that. Like, that's a really simple, not even a recipe, but just making their own mint tea and flavouring things with herbs.
Would they drink that, like?
They drink that, yeah. Okay. They really would, yeah. So I would say, like, my kids are 10, 9, and 7.
Yeah.
So they haven't always been like that, but they have always been, like, in FOTA, in Fota down in Cork, by the rhino enclosure. There's a huge fennel plant. And I remember my kids just standing there, stuffing their mouth with the fennel, instead of looking at the rhino. And I was saying, come on, they were like, there's fennel, But like, it's just trying to make them aware of their surroundings like that they'd smell it. And like even wild garlic, in the woods in Killa, there's unbelievable wild garlic there. Yeah. And it's just them going through the woods and smelling the wild garlic and wanting to pick some and do like a little bit of light foraging is really encouraging. And it really empowers them as well when they know what to do with the herbs,
Yeah. And so, do you think they're more adventurous at the kitchen table then in terms of what they're willing to try?
Yeah, and I think they're more demanding as well. That's the thing. It's like playing with fire, teaching them this is going to be so full of flavour and amazing. And then if it's not the next day, they're like, where was the passion in that? So it's trying to tread a fine line in educating them, but not making them like little rulers.
Yeah, exactly.
So
or food snobs.
Totally, yeah. And like they need to learn how to cook. Like majorly, they need to learn how to cook because they're like little food critics as opposed to chefs, so we need to kind of get that balance right, I think.
Yeah. So Deirdre, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot with this question, but like, could you speak to maybe apart from your own program, obviously, like what's the landscape of sort of food in schools? What does it currently kind of look like, and what interventions are there from the state? Lilly mentioned obviously the hot meals being provided in some cases and so on. Like what's your sense of the state of food in schools at the moment?
Actual food going into schools or food education in schools?
Well, both, yeah.
Food education in schools, there's not very much.
Yeah.
It's very little. There's a program called Food Dudes. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. And that's pretty much it. And then outside of that, it's up to the individual teachers, I think, who are invested and are into food to bring some kind of food education into the classes. School is the best place for kids to learn about food after the kitchen. Obviously, at home is a great place too. But the reality is, and I would work with children in disadvantaged areas, and unfortunately, they don't have lovely herbs grown on their windows. They're not saying to their mothers, "There's no time in this." They're saying, where just like I go into classes and I'll say to them, for example, we have some lovely cheese here. Where does cheese come from? You think that would be something that most kids would know? Oh, it comes from the garage. So there's a big, like you were saying, there's a lot of people that have absolutely no connection to where their food comes from, and I think they're the people who really need to be educated, apart from the people who are already invested in it. And
do you find like a demographic difference that's in some schools and other schools that the kids would be more clued in? Is it a class issue?
It's definitely a socio-economic issue, yeah. I've gone to schools in disadvantaged areas and I've taught them, I teach a really simple recipe, a tomato bruschetta, and I've taught it from junior infants up to 6th class, and you would have children in 6th class that have never cut into a tomato before. And they're saying to me, Miss, there's something coming out of this. I'm like, it's the juice coming out of the tomato. But they literally have never cut into a tomato before. And that is coming from a disadvantaged area. Whereas you go to other schools and they will say, well, this is a tomato, they look at different types of tomatoes.
Yeah.
Whereas in socioeconomic areas where they're disadvantaged, they don't even know, they have no access probably to tomatoes at all.
So who, when you go into a school, is the school typically paying for that, or is the department paying for it? How does that side of it work?
No, the department do not pay me, so the school might get funding through a program like Creative Schools or something like that.
Okay.
And that would be how I get paid. Originally, when I started out, I go into a lot of preschools, so I deal with kids from kind of age 2 and 3 upwards, mostly, and I did that because they are private concerns, so you can go in and they can pay you. But I really want to get into national schools, and I have spoken to lawyers, solicitors, government, politicians even.
You may need the lawyers and the solicitors as well,
knowing
government, but anyway.
But I've spoken to people, like I've spoken to Simon Harris and people at the top of the food chain when it comes to food education. They're like, well, you need to go to Europe to get funding. So I'm just one person on my own. I mean, I think for us, we need to get a collective together in terms of food education to really push it forward in schools, like with the likes of JP McMahon and Doreen Allen and people like that. I think the collective will be what will improve food education in our schools.
So what do your programs look like typically? Like just paint a picture for us, like in a typical school. What are you doing? And presumably, like we've that issue in Ireland as well, where we don't have kitchens in schools, so presumably you're having to rock up.
Yeah,
with
so I'd
all
rock
the
into a
equipment.
school, yeah, absolutely. And there are new schools being built all the time, and they're being built without kitchens, so it's a real lost
Yeah.
opportunity. So I would rock up to a school, and everything I do is available to kids at their desk in the classroom. So it doesn't require any heat, doesn't require any special equipment. I do things like a tomato bruschetta, like I was saying, but we break down all the ingredients. So the kids would have a look at the tomatoes, they'd look at them, smell them, lick them, then they would cut into them. So I use safe knives. So safety is a real issue in a lot of schools, well, for all parents even. So I'd use a safe knife. The kids would cut into the tomato. We might use a magnifying glass. This is one of the best tools to have in the kitchen, a magnifying glass. You get that out, you can keep the kids occupied for hours with that. I was just teaching kids this morning, and one of the things I do actually, and this kind of comes into biodiversity as well, is I'll bring different colours and types of tomatoes into the classroom, because kids think, I'll ask them, what does a tomato look like? And they'll say, it's red and round. And then I'll take out a green tomato and they're like, well, that's a watermelon. Or, the little yellow cherry tomatoes, they're like, well, they're maybe grapes. I think they're grapes. Are they grapes? And so I'm bringing a little bit of biodiversity into it. And then we'll cut into the tomatoes. And I do this whole thing where they get to shout and scream really loudly while I'm cutting the tomato to make it fun. And to see what colour it is inside in the tomato. And I'll be like messing, saying, I think it's going to be pink. And they're like, no, it's going to be yellow or red or whatever. And they shout out their colour really loud. And then they're really engaged to see what the tomato is like inside, and then I'll open it. And then I might go through several different types of tomatoes in that way, but getting them excited and interested to see what's inside the tomato. And then they'll get their own tomatoes, and then they'll be dying to cut into it to see what it looks like inside. It's getting them really engaged in the whole, and that's only with a tomato, that's only one thing. And then we'll break it down, I'll make a little oil and vinegar dressing, and they love that because the balsamic vinegar in the oil makes gorgeous shapes and everything. Yeah. And then mix that with the tomatoes and then the bread, and we bring garlic into it, and we talk about the garlic, and they'll rub the garlic on the bread, and then the basil, and then we do a whole smelling thing with the basil, and that they've made their tomato bruschetta. So it's really simple, but they get so engaged in it because I try and make it as fun as possible. So it's as simple as that.
It does strike me as you say that like we've got obviously home economics in the secondary education in Ireland, which is optional obviously, and not, famously not many boys do it and so on, but we don't have a subject in primary school, which is like it's such a shame, because it's the perfect subject for children, as you described that exercise. So simple, and wouldn't require a dedicated kitchen or whatever facility.
No, absolutely not. I teach another program called Sapere, which is a sensory food education program, and it doesn't even go into that detail within schools. So it would be as simple as bringing in a pepper and bringing in an apple and saying to the kids, what is this? What is this? Showing them a pepper and saying, what is this? And they'll say, oh, it's a pepper. How do you know it's a pepper? How do you know it's not an apple? What about it tells you that it's a pepper and not an apple? Really simple things like that. And even without cutting into it to have a look at it and tasting it, they'll know it's a pepper because obviously looking at it. And then, okay, close your eyes and now see which is the pepper and which is the apple. So it's really, really simple things like that. Food listening is another really good exercise that's part of the Sapere program. So I would do that with classes all the time. They would put on ear defenders and they taste different foods, and they're trying to figure out which is the loudest. They love that one. And like sugar snap peas, bringing them up to their ears and getting them to snap them. You do the whole class all at one time, and there's this resounding pop in the classroom. It's really simple. Like, teachers can do that really simply. Like a packet of sugar snap peas is like not very expensive. The teacher can bring them into the classroom, and that's yours. And then that is a whole lesson in itself.
Yeah.
You can open them, see how many peas you have in yours compared to the person beside you. Taste it, lick it, smell it. There's so much that can be done.
It's the full sensory sort of experience.
It's the full sensory experience, yeah. Absolutely, yeah.
Lily, what have you thought about? Because I think any parent will have gone through this sort of food dude cycle with children, where they're bringing vegetables probably home with them, and they're getting little treats and so on. And I guess the the idea of that program is that you're encouraging, you're rewarding and incentivizing eating vegetables and fruit and so on. But what's your general view of whether that works or not? And
I think it's a lot of plastic. It definitely is a lot of plastic. I think, is it senior infants or first class? Is it first class or something that they do that
first class,
in?
I think, yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember, but my 3 have gone through it now. And I know my middle child used to I'd find little bits of pepper in his bag, and he'd have the toy, and he'd say, I can't believe it, like, you just have to accept a bit of pepper, and they give you this plastic,
Yeah.
It was, he had it well copped, I think. And I think even, like what Deirdre was saying about bringing in a whole pepper, like, instead they got little bags with little vac-packed slices.
Sliced, yeah.
And I mean, the pepper would be so slimy, like, I would not eat that, and I wouldn't expect anyone else to eat it. So I think that was a huge issue, because it actually caused barriers more than anything, really.
Yeah.
Because children have an association of being, not forced to, but, having an adult say to them, you need to eat this bit of brown apple that's been vac-packed for the past 2 weeks, sitting in a truck or whatever. So I just think it's not a very effective way. It's an attempt, but I'd say, I don't know how much that whole program is costing, but
I
I'd
think
say
4 million is the budget.
Yeah, and I mean, like what you're saying sounds like my kids would love that. All ages, they would love that.
Yeah.
And it's just more enjoyable, and it's just the multi-sensorial aspect is what's really good about it as well. Like, that's what one of my kids loves, is just the sound of fennel crunching. That's what she loves about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot more effective, and sort of treating them as equal humans as well when you're communicating with them about food, letting them get their hands dirty. I think that all really works, whereas I think they just have it copped that the food dudes thing is just like a trick, or, I don't think they need any sort of plastic toys to convince them either. It's like literally if they were allowed to get their hands dirty and do a bit of chopping. Like, we actually have, Deirdre sent me the knife and the peeler, and my gang love it, Even my 10-year-old would still choose to use that opposed to a sharper knife. They have a great time with it, and it's great fun.
Yeah. There's also the kind of lack of seasonality with some of the veg that's been certainly imported, and as you say, lots of packaging, and giving them like, if the goal is to give them an experience of vegetables, if you're giving them a crap experience, that's not a good plan either. Like.
And it should be a year-long thing as well, like that if it was done seasonally, like if it was once a week, let's check in with what's in season, and let's bring in an actual apple. I mean, the beautiful apples you have there, like, they're absolutely gorgeous. I'm seeing them now all over the country, and if they could tune into that a little bit, it would be incredible.
Yeah.
Because like we don't have blueberries and pineapples and mangoes and all of these things growing here. It's not sustainable then to have a kid that will just eat something like that. It's just not.
I do remember asking the question of Board B, like, why wouldn't they just bring in a basket of veg into a school? And there's obviously, the argument is the efficiency of doing that and the amount of waste and so on. So, but like, to me, that's not a good enough reason not to try it. What's your sense then of like whether foods should be a subject in primary schools? Like, do you think that's something that we should do?
Definitely, yeah. I think, it definitely should be. I mean, like, everyone has to eat and everyone has to cook. And I just think it's like doing people a real disservice not to teach them how to cook. Like Deirdre was saying, you can't expect everyone to learn it from home either. Like, not everyone is from the same background, so not everyone has that advantage of learning from home. So for some people, like, they're still cooking, the omelette they learned how to make in home ec in first year, and then they dropped home ec class and did other things, but they still make that omelette,
Yeah.
So it's really, really crucial. I think food education is absolutely massive,
Yeah. So do you think we should make it like an actual subject, or because I know with the way the curriculum is set up, it's not so easy to kind of introduce new subjects. It's like a super tanker to turn around.
To barge in with it, I know. But I do think, and I think it's primary school is where it's at as well.
Yeah.
If you can't get them in play school, I think definitely primary school, even if it was, worst case scenario, a week focused on it, that would be really fantastic. And things are really helpful though, like having gardens in schools and things like that even are helping to connect kids,
Yeah.
So even small things like small changes like that are being made, especially with the involvement of parents as well, where it's possible,
So that kind of leads us into school gardens and so on, Deirdre. Like, are you seeing when you go around to schools many schools that have gardens? Can you work them into your program?
I would love to be able to work them into my program, but that requires a lot of forward planning for me. So, like, if I'm teaching a whole school, I could be teaching 300 or 400 children. So, the school garden is not going to provide enough food for that. But I have been in some schools that have the most amazing school gardens. In my own kids' school, their school garden is pretty pathetic. It's kind of a real chore to get it going, and we've been talking about it now in the Parents Association for the last 3 or 4 years. There seems to be no appetite for it. So I think in a school you need a real champion of somebody who's going to take it on as a project.
Yeah.
Because there's all, the school is closed all through the summer, so there's all that time when it's not being tended to. So yeah, and I do look, and I see, as I said, I work a lot in preschools, and I see there's a lot of they will do a lot of planting with the kids as well, like you were saying, Lily, the things that grow really quickly, like the fast grow lettuce and things like that, and they love all that. But there's so much more that can be done.
Yeah, I should say, I suppose, that in GIY we are trying to put a school garden into every primary school in Ireland over the next 5 years, I suppose. But we're starting with hopefully 1,600 schools over the next 3 years.
Amazing.
But it's a heavy lift for us in terms of financing all that, and obviously we feel like the government should be in supporting that, and they're not. I know we have a couple of teachers in the audience, but so if anybody would like to comment, I know teachers would say they've got already a very busy day. The kitchen, you're saying, like there's new schools being built again without kitchens and without gardens. So there's a major gap in the planning and the thinking around that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Like I was in a new school in January and February this year, brand new school. They'd only moved into it during COVID. And a beautiful school, and no, there was like one oven in the school. Like an oven is not an expensive thing to put into a school, but in order for me to go into a school and work with 200 or 300 children, I need, if we want to do something in an oven and cook something, I need multiple ovens. So even 3 ovens would work, because you could use 2 or 3 racks, but they're just not putting them in, and it's not an expensive thing to put in.
Yeah.
But I think they think that you have to have the whole kitchen setup that maybe you would have in a secondary school, like, home economics kitchen. But it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, you just need a workspace. And, like, there's so much kids can do at their desk. Like, they can whisk eggs, they can make little egg omelets, they just need to go in the oven. There's so much that they can do, but the ovens are not, and ovens are such an easy thing to put into a...
Okay, well let's come out of the school environment then a little bit and think about the home for a little bit, and maybe kind of to think about some of the practical things that we can do. So if we've got, the fussy eater or the child that isn't interested in veg and so on, what are the kind of practical things that we can do to try and help with that?
It's about exposure to food. So if you want your child to eat fruits and veg or whatever, you need to give them to them. So there's no point in saying your child is not eating broccoli if you never actually serve them broccoli. So, and this is going to really depress some people in the audience now, but in order for a child to accept a new food, like broccoli, for example, it needs to be presented or offered to the child anything from 7 to 20 times. But we as parents often give up after the 3rd attempt because we're like, I've given it to them, they don't like it, I'm never giving it to them again. Such a waste of food, like the whole food waste thing comes in. But we actually need to keep presenting it to them. And when people say, I've given it to them a couple of times, they might only be giving it to them raw or something like that. So in a very unpalatable way. So broccoli can be, I'm using broccoli as an example because it's the one that kids hate the most, in my experience. But you can give broccoli to kids in a myriad of ways. So you can give it to them in a pesto, you can give it to them in a curry, you can give it to them, deep fried in a batter, something like that. Like, it doesn't always have to be offered raw on the side of a plate. Or you can give it to them. Another great tip if you want your kids to try a new vegetable is to serve it with a dipping sauce. So it can be something like, even some ketchup and mayonnaise mixed up together, or a little garlic sauce and then dip it in. That's a really effective strategy to use. But what I would say is don't give up if they have turned it down after 3 attempts, because it can take up to 1,000 times to offer a child.
Wow.
I know.
That's a lot of dinners.
So imagine that poor parent. So yeah, that's in really extreme cases, okay? Very extreme cases. But you have to just keep offering it to them and offer it to them in different ways. And as all the things that Lily was saying about getting them involved in cooking is the best method of exposure that you can offer them. And of course growing as well, because they are so excited about growing their own food. We've started growing ourselves a little bit, and the kids are so excited going out watching the tomatoes grow. Rhubarb is a really big thing in our house because we grow a lot of rhubarb, using the rhubarb, but it's a repeated exposure. And exposure doesn't always just have to be in the kitchen. It can be outside the kitchen in ways like reading books that have a positive effect, that speak about food in a very positive way. So speak about the foods that you want your child to eat in a positive way. Also, if your child has a play kitchen, giving them real food to play with rather than just plastic or wooden food. The food shopping, like you were saying, Lily, if your kids are quite small, you could give them a little shopping list and send them off to find tomatoes and broccoli. Again, we're back at the broccoli. So there are lots of things to do, but it is a long-term thing. It's not a short-term. There's no short-term solution to getting your child to eat more fruits and vegetables. It's a long-term strategy. You have to keep at it.
I think one of the things as well that maybe works against parents is that we can be a bit afraid of the mess, like just letting them loose and letting the kitchen look like a bomb hit it because it will. Any kind of things, things not to do, Deirdre? Anything that strikes you that kind of might act as a turn off or go the other way?
I run a webinar on how to get your kids to eat more veg, and one of the things that comes up on my Instagram all the time is about bribing your kids to eat vegetables, or bribing, threatening, cajoling, pressurizing. So all those things. So, let's go back to the broccoli. Eat your broccoli and you'll get some ice cream. It's kind of like the food dudes thing. If you bribe your children to eat something, the research shows that they are more likely to like the reward, which is the ice cream, and less likely to like the broccoli. So when you bribe your child, you're actually not teaching them anything. You're only teaching them that they're going to get a reward at the end. You're not teaching them any kind of appreciation for the food that you're trying to encourage them to eat. So
that makes complete sense when you phrase it like that.
Yeah.
So they're learning a process rather than
So they're going straight for the ice cream, and to get to the ice cream I need to eat this broccoli, but really my focus is on the ice cream. So don't do that. Stop doing that. Just stop, okay? But threatening and also over praising your child for eating something, like giving them a round of applause every time they pop a piece of broccoli in their mouth, is actually counterproductive as well. It's putting a lot of pressure on the child to perform, and the child will make that distinction between the way you react when they eat broccoli and the way you react when they eat that ice cream. So you're not giving your child a round of applause every time they eat their ice cream, but you might be doing it when they eat their broccoli. And I've seen this in my own family, not me now, but anyway, and not my side of the family, shall I add. But but it's actually put so much pressure on the child. It's actually not a good strategy at all either.
Yeah. Any parents in the audience about what works and what doesn't for them, if you're interested in contributing, or any kids in the audience that have anything they'd like to say?
I think it's great to
You think it's
grow.
great?
Yeah.
So what have you been growing?
I've been growing carrots, potatoes,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah. And do you think that growing that stuff has made you think differently about eating things inside in the kitchen then?
yes, because it's organic, and I know that because it's from my garden.
You know where it's from? Yeah. What do you think is the nicest thing to grow, the best thing you've ever grown?
I think it's potatoes, since
Yeah?
it keeps you through the summer, and
Yeah.
you can make nice salads with it.
Very good. And what's the worst thing? Is there any vegetable you wouldn't eat?
No.
You try everything?
Yeah.
See? There you go. Very good. Well done, you. That's brilliant. Well said, Vika. Excellent. Round of applause for that. Okay, so I suppose one of the things we haven't maybe covered a huge amount is the kind of growing side of it, and getting children more interested in food by growing, and it's a point that she just raised there. Like I know you've done a little bit of that yourself at home, Lily. What kind of impact have you seen that have?
I've seen my kids become over-ambitious, like wanting to get goats and cows, and
Yeah.
I think it just one thing leads to another, basically. Like I'm trying to sort of keep it at herbs, but like my dad sort of, his father was a farmer, so he grew up on a farm. So he thinks every year you need to plant a field of potatoes, this sort of thing. So he doesn't do small crops of anything. He does huge amounts of things. So we're still harvesting his potatoes. He did absolutely loads of them, and like she was saying, potatoes are fantastic to have. They're it feels like a luxury and such a treat to have homegrown spuds. It's just amazing. And of course, perfectly local, perfectly seasonal, and it really ties them in, because I know my kids will still be looking for new spuds in a month's time, and I'll be saying they're gone. We can't get them; they're gone. So
but they are kind of a magical veg, aren't they? Because there's something really kind of. You don't know what you're going to get, so there's the element of sort of surprise and mystery about it that's wonderful.
And my dad was only telling a story the other night about one of his friends, in the 70s, he brought one of his friends from school, and they were going through his own dad's fields, and he was saying, sure, all the potatoes are gone, but he was looking at the top of the stems, his friend didn't even realise that they were under the ground, and that was in the 70s, so it can happen to anyone, not knowing that marmalade is made from oranges, and they're almost like sort of little loops, and where people, there's little slip-ups where, the information isn't passed on to people, and I think that's majorly happening with food now,
Deirdre, one of the things, we used to do a programme here locally in Waterford, and we used to send from Grow HQ, we used to send out meals into schools, and it was a kind of social eating program. So we get the kids to kind of sit at their desks, and they'd eat a hot meal, and we'd go in and we'd talk about things. But one of the things we used to focus on was beetroot, and it's not an easy thing to get kids to eat beetroot, but we had this idea one time, because if you've grown beetroot yourself or you eat it, you'll know that has this very very profound impact on the colour of your urine, shall we say, and lots of people have been kind of caught out by that, thinking they've got some sort of a mad disease or something, but it's the sort of the colouring in the beetroot that does that to you. And we used to say that to the kids in the classroom, that beetroot makes your pee go red, and they were all like, give me more, I want to try more. They were all really into that,
Just the angle.
That angle really worked for them, to overcome all of their reticence about beetroot. So it's like the funniest things kind of click with children, and they suddenly are willing to try things,
Yeah, well, I think if you talk any kind of toilet talk, they'll engage with that.
Yeah.
So I actually was just teaching a class of adults, special need adults, during the week, and we made a beetroot smoothie, and I tell them exactly that. That if you drink this, your wee is going to go pink, and they all love it, and I teach that in my classes all the time. I may or may not have picked it up from your book, but I think I knew that already.
That's okay. Bit of healthy plagiarism.
Yeah. But I talk about poo all the time as well. I talk about fibre, and I don't say fibre because I think kids don't really know what fibre is.
Yeah.
But I'll say, you eat fruits and vegetables and it'll help you poo, and they all think that's just hilarious.
So get them interested in what their poo is going to look like.
That's
the key.
That is the key, yeah. If you talk about poo, they all just go, disgusting. But it engages them, and they remember that. They're not going to remember fibre, but they'll remember poo. It'll help them poo. And as well, with the beetroot, it'll turn their wee pink. And like that, they'll drink the I do a beetroot smoothie. They'll drink that, and then immediately they're like, I need to go to the toilet, and I need to go to the toilet. You have to go and try and explain that it doesn't happen that quickly.
Instant.
But I wish there was loads more little things like that about food that there were, but there aren't that many things. But they're really great ways of engaging kids with food and getting them to try things.
Lily, what else have you tried growing then at home with the kids?
So salad leaves are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Salad leaves and sort of a stir-fry mix, like all the mizuna and things like that. Like, they're very kind of low maintenance. Like, you could throw them in the ground, forget about them. When my husband throws them in the ground, forgets about them. And then they grow, and the kids can go out like that. They can go out and they can help cut them and use them. And of course, there's always the guilt thing, like, that I'd say, Daddy grew that now, and they're like, they can't leave it on the plate. They have to kind of eat it, and then they're like, that was brilliant, Dad,
Well done,
so salad leaves and things are great. And like you were saying, the rhubarb is fantastic. If there's anything that you can make into dessert, that's really good, you know. So even having like a little apple tree, I found pears kind of fiddly to grow. But apples have been really great, and we did sort of strawberries. They all had a little strawberry plant. But the wild strawberries actually are amazing. The little wild alpine strawberries, they're so low maintenance and they spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
And they're incredible. They're just tiny little strawberries, but they're really kind of a thing that you sort of sociable little fruit that you just eat in the garden. Like, you never will wash them or bring them into the kitchen or anything. They're just for eating when you're outside, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they're fantastic.
Yeah, what about you, Deirdre, in terms of growing? Have you got into that with your kids?
Yeah, we did a couple of years ago. We got I live in the city and I have a very small garden, but we got a raised bed and we started growing. And so we've grown tomatoes, we've grown potatoes. The kids were amazed by the potatoes. And, you just dig down onto the ground and there they are. They're the potatoes. The rhubarb, the lettuce. We've done carrots. Our carrots weren't great because they planted them in a bed and they literally threw 3 packets of seeds in on top of each other, and they were all tiny. But
again, though, a very sensory experience harvesting carrots, because you get that sort of the crunch as they come out, and you get beautiful, lovely.
Yeah, so that's a thing that I would bring into classes in schools all the time. And on a slightly different note, I would talk to kids about where it comes from, and I try. Sometimes I might buy these and put them into a pot and allow the kids to pull them themselves. And then we talk about where do they grow? Do they grow onto the ground? Do they grow on a tree? Does the farmer fish for them? About all kinds of fruits and vegetables as well, to get them to think about where they come from. And then the best thing about carrots like this, if you can get them with kids, is like turn them into a tickler like this. So we did that. It's all that sensory stuff as well. But yeah, we're kind of a bit behind on the growing thing, but yeah, definitely we're going to keep going with it.
Yeah, and like as I was saying, we're trying to get that kind of school garden thing going. So really to just make sure that any school can have can have at least the facilities. But then there's also the issue of the lack of skills there, and teachers feeling either too busy to do it, or a bit like, I don't want to look stupid here, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing. So there is that kind of barrier to it, isn't it?
Oh, I think like anyone who's grown themselves, you'll have had a good sort of 3 years of hits and misses, where know certain things will work. And even like with carrots, like planting them in really stony soil, and you get all these sort of twisted, sort of funky looking carrots. But like that only happens if you're doing it yourself as well at home, that you get you get 2 carrots that are entwined, and like that's sort of the beauty of it. Like, and kids love that, like that they're so unpredictable. But it is really sort of hit and miss. It's finding what works with you and what works with your shed too as well. Like if you're busy, you're not going to be able to weed in between all these rows. You're just going to be like the no-dig gardening is fantastic. Like I think that's going to be the way
and I think
go.
with young kids as well, if you focus on like the bigger seeds, things like peas and beans and sweet corn and so on, where they're kind of, it's harder just to make a mistake with it. Like they're just bigger, and they're not as with lettuce and carrots and so on, such tiny seeds, it can be hard for young kids to...
And they scatter them absolutely
They'll scatter them everywhere, exactly. So, Lily, one of the last things I want to just ask you about is like, I always marvel with people that can get a weekly recipe column in a national newspaper. I don't know how you do it. The deadline must come around very, very, very determinedly every single week. But like from writing that column, like what's your sense of like for like parents who have young kids, and you're kind of coming home from work, and you're like, we're all so busy, and we're trying to also then put like good food on the table for our kids. Are there some tips that you give for people who are like me, struggling to come up with ideas?
Well, people love chicken.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I could do a chicken recipe every single week. I'd say that's all kind of people want, but they want, minimum ingredients, minimum fuss. Like my recipes have nearly always been under half an hour. You just want to, you don't want the experience or a project of making something.
Yeah.
You just want dinner on the table. So I think minimum ingredients, starting with fresh ingredients. Starting with something that's an actual ingredient. Like if it's cabbage or a potato or something like that. That's really, really good, and you'll always get really good results from that as well. Yeah, so as long as it's something that everyone will love as well, like crowd pleaser is always really good. So I think it's just minimum ingredients, maximum flavour, and that for me is where herbs as well have proved to be absolutely amazing. Like you can bring a tin of tomatoes and onion and garlic, and then you're adding your herbs, like if it's basil or oregano or anything, it can just bring the whole thing to life and give it impact,
Are there things that your kids just won't eat? Or are they it sounds like they're pretty adventurous, like they're willing to...
There's nothing they genuinely wouldn't eat, they're picky, and they would be giving out about things, but they would eat it ultimately,
Yeah.
But there's definitely things that they wouldn't eat. Like I have to run past what's for dinner with everyone before I cook it, definitely.
Yeah.
But it has proved, they've had 10 years of cooking something different, nearly every night. So
do you ever get into cooking different things for different kids?
Yeah, yeah. So then I kind of would have a tomato sauce that you can use as spaghetti or as bolognese, or one of my sons doesn't eat cheese, so we would have normal pizza, and then I would do sort of a Middle Eastern pizza for him, with hummus on the base, and then sort of fried meat or just pomegranate seed on top. So it's just kind of chopping and changing, and listening to them has proved to be the best thing, really.
Okay. And Deirdre, what about you? What are your kind of go-to meals midweek and flying in the door?
Flying in the door, yeah. We're big chicken fajitas, actually, would be a big favourite in our house. And actually my son, who's 11, my youngest, he's been making them since he was 6. So, and he's very vested in it because it's his favourite dinner. So he will actually do it himself. So he'll do it pretty much from scratch himself. Now
For the whole family?
Yeah.
What age is he?
He's 11 now, yeah.
That's great.
Now I do have a 13-year-old who's sometimes vegetarian, sometimes not vegetarian, sometimes flexitarian, sometimes a meat eater. So she's proving a bit tricky at the moment. But yeah, chicken, like you said, Lily, is a great one. Prawns, I'll always have prawns in the freezer. Pesto. Well, I live in Greystone, so we're up the road from the Happy Pear. So we love their pesto if we don't make our own, which we do sometimes as well. What else now? Oh, I have a recipe in my book.
Nice plug. I was going to let you plug the book before the end, but that's your chance gone now.
It's also a chicken recipe, but it's very versatile. So it's I call it Bash It About Chicken. So the kids love making this. You get a chicken breast, put it in between some parchment, and get the rolling pin out and get them to bash the bejesus out of it, and then just oil, salt, and pepper, and fry in the pan. Takes about 5 minutes. Not even 5 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes each side. And then you can put that on top of pasta, you can put it in a sandwich, you can put it on a salad, you can put in all sorts of stuff. So that's another really fast one. Or nachos. Nachos, actually. We make nachos. So I'd make use bolognese, use mincemeat as a base, add all your kind of Mexican spices in, and then make my homemade tortillas. Just chop up tortillas and do them in the air fryer, and have that. That's another great one.
So presumably the book is it a kids recipe book, or is it for adults to work with kids, or a bit of both?
No, it's for the kids to make from themselves. So it's some very simple basic recipes, and they're all, so I have 3 kids, so there's 3 kids represented in the book, and it's all represented by age. So the simplest recipes are done by the youngest little model in the book, and then so on and so forth. So they're either oven-based. There's very few hob-based recipes because they're the trickiest for kids. But it's really, really simple stuff.
As long as they leave the oven heat up properly.
Yeah.
All right, any last questions from our audience? Just before we finish, anybody got anything they'd like to say? We all good? Everyone's very shy this afternoon.
Yeah.
Okay, just maybe to finish, any final thoughts that you give around the kind of general approach to getting kids interested in food, or the food education side of things, bigger picture. Well,
to parents, I would say get your kids involved in cooking, full stop, and growing, of course.
Of course.
Full stop as well. And don't give up if your child says that they don't like something, just keep going at it. But use whole ingredients. And that's the problem I would have with the food dudes, is that it's not a whole ingredient. They're not seeing, there's no relationship between the slimy peppers they get to what an actual pepper is. So try and cook with whole foods as much as possible. It is messy, it is time consuming, but everything we do with kids is messy and time consuming. So, cooking is just another thing. It's a life skill. And I often say this to parents, like, if your child is learning to walk, do you stop teaching them after they've fallen down 3 times? No, you keep going. So if your child doesn't like a vegetable after the first 3 times, do you stop? No, you have to keep going. Children need to learn to like food in the same way they need to learn to walk, they need to learn to talk, they need to learn to read, everything like that. So please, keep going. Keep up the good fight.
That's a really, really good point. Lily, anything you'd add to that?
All what she said.
That's
I think
the
so.
cop-out. You can't go with that.
It's never too late to start.
Yeah.
And like that, it continues on through college and through adulthood and everything. Like, we're all constantly learning as well. So I would say don't feel guilty as well about anything. Like obviously I'm cooking and writing about food and photographing food all the time and everything. But I think it's fine to buy stuff every now and again as well. It's no problem. So I think just do your best and encourage them, talk to them and listen to them, which I think is really important, because we all have our own opinions as adults as well about what we like to eat. So it's very important. And it could be like a sensorial thing, like they don't like the feel of something or the taste of something, and I think that's fine as well.
Huge thanks to my guests Lilly Higgins and Deirdre Doyle for taking part in this episode of the podcast. And that was the final episode of this series of Food Done Right. We were absolutely delighted to bring these conversations to the centre of Waterford for the Harvest Festival. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the conversations that we had. There is absolutely loads of stuff happening out there in the GIY universe, so please check out the website giy.ie for loads more information and stay up to date by following us on our social channels. Thanks a million for listening to this series of Food Done Right, and we'll talk to you again soon.